Sheila, it is so lovely to be able to talk to you today. I know you've been here before.
Yes, and I'm very pleased and happy to be with all of you.
Yeah. And Sheila, we're going to start at a point that I need to mention first, because I only learned a few days ago when we were preparing today that there is one person in this room who you have known since you were both teenagers.
Well, I was a teenager.
She was a little bit older than you.
Yes.
Tell us about that and who that mystery person is.
Marion. Yes, Marion and my guide captain were good friends, and they both went to East Barnet Baptist Church. And after I became a Christian, I was looking around different churches to find which one I would like. And my guide captain, because she belonged to a Baptist church, I thought, well, we'll try that. And so I went there and met Marion, and we've been in contact ever since.
Amazing. And we'll come back to that part of the story, why Sheila has over many years had a special connection with St. Mark's first, and then Denham Parish Church. Sheila, I'm going to summarise one bit just because of the time. The Church of England didn't get a good report card from you when we talked a few days ago, because the Church of England churches you experienced as a young person, it wasn't really very successful, you trying to find out about God in those churches. But there was one particular encounter you had as a teenager. You went to one of the big rallies in Haringey in the 50s where Billy Graham came to speak.
Yes. Billy Graham came and had a big crusade, as it was called, at Haringey Arena. And my friends and I were at school. I was in the fourth year then. We were arguing about it and talking about it and discussing it. And I thought, well, I want to go and see what it's really like. And a lot of us sort of wanted to do this, so we hired a coach and went to Haringey Arena. And when Billy Graham was preaching, I could feel that God was present there. But it was as though there was a big thick curtain between me and God. And afterwards I thought, I must find God. So I started to read the Bible. And it was about a year later that I became a Christian.
And what was the deciding factor a year later? Do you remember? You had that sense of God's presence, you studied the Bible. How did you come to the point when you said, I want to follow this Jesus?
Well, I think during my Sunday school days, the people who had the most influence on my life were missionaries. My brown owl was a mission, went to Nigeria with CMS, and she came back and she spoke to the Sunday school, and I could see Christ in her. I thought, I want what she's got. I was conscious that God wanted me to do missionary work, but I didn't want to. I wanted to be a teacher. So there was this struggle going on. I had a friend at school who took me to various youth meetings, and she took me to a rally in the Albert Hall where an evangelist called Tom Rees was preaching. And it was during his preaching that I realized this was my last chance. God was calling me, and if I didn't accept this time, that was it. So I submitted to God on that evening, and I've never regretted it.
That's brilliant. And that's such a lovely thing to say for someone who's not 16 anymore, that since that decisive moment, you had a sense that God has been faithful to you through some ups and downs in life, to put it mildly.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So I find it fascinating that from early on, even in Sunday school and through your brow now, there was this pull towards mission. Then you became a Christian. Was that all plain sailing? Then you became a Christian and you signed up for mission and you were sent out. How did that happen after you became a Christian?
Well, I had to finish grammar school, and I went to university and studied ancient and medieval history. I took teacher training. But it was while I was still at university, through the Christian Union, a member of Wycliffe came and showed a film about his work in Brazil.
Just a little footnote for those of you who don't know what Wycliffe is. Wycliffe is one of the big organizations who work in Bible translation across the world, Wycliffe Bible Translators, and they are one of our mission partners.
And at that time I thought, oh, I could never do that, because this particular Wycliffe member had been working in a remote people group in the Brazilian jungle. And I was terrified at the thought of the isolation of it.
Yeah.
But we had another meeting where there were representatives from several missions who were speaking, and one of them was a member of Wycliffe Bible Translators. And as we'd come into it was one of the London colleges that we had the meeting in. We were all given a piece of paper with a number on it as we went into the meeting. And I thought, I wonder if I'll be in the discussion group with that Wycliffe member. And I was. So after that, I became a prayer partner for Wycliffe and went to various meetings. And, well, I became convinced that this was the mission the Lord wanted me to join. The Lord had been in my life before I became a Christian. And one very significant thing was when I was 13, I was very keen on Latin at school. And my Latin teacher said, "Would you like to learn Greek?" And I said, yes. And so I started learning Greek very early. And of course, since the original language for the New Testament is Greek, it's been an amazing help to me, having started Greek so early.
Yeah.
I can use and read the New Testament in Greek, and I thank the Lord for his hand on my life in that.
Yeah. For many of us sitting here, we try to put ourselves into your shoes. You were a young woman. You were ready to serve God somewhere in the world. It would seem an enormous wrench to us to leave the country we know, the family we know, the friends we know. How did you experience that when you were first sent out to go to Africa and to leave everything you know and that is safe, as it were, behind?
Well, it wasn't easy. I remember my parents and my brother coming with me to Euston Station to take a train to Liverpool, because I first went to West Africa by boat. In fact, the second time I went, after my first home leave, we also went by boat. I remember we were all crying. And communications then weren't as good as they are now. It was only by post. And I remember British postal workers went on strike for 7 weeks. So I had no connection.
Nothing changes, does it?
And had no connection with them during that time.
Yeah. There was a news blackout for you because the post wasn't delivered.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I believe you first thought you might not end up in Togo, but in one of the neighboring countries. But at some point, through a set of circumstances, it was clear there was some help needed, especially in Togo. This is Togo, narrow and long. And I'm going to zoom in a bit, Sheila, because the two places that are of interest, I hope I got it right from memory. One is called Bassar, and the other one is called Kara, is that right?
Yes.
Oh, I got that right.
Good
So
for
the
you.
red bits on the map, in the middle there of Togo, middle towards the north. And then there was one missionary already in Togo, wasn't there?
Yes.
And for you that was wonderful because you built up a strong relationship with her, didn't you?
Well, it developed over the years. We're still friendly, and I hope that Ellen will take me to visit her in August. Well, and Monica's a bit older than me, and the first work that Wycliffe did in Africa was in Ghana. So she was in Ghana, and she was assigned to study the Bassar language, and she was with another lady then, a lady called Mary, and they started studying the language. And as they studied it, they realized that nearly all the Bassar people in Ghana were immigrants, and that the people really came from the area around the town of Bassar in Togo. So they went on a visit to Togo and found out that this was so, and it'd be better that if they did their language study and eventually Bible translation in Togo rather than in Ghana. Well, Monica had studied French at university, so it wasn't any problem to her. And she also did Bible college in France. So it wasn't any problem to her to go and work in a French-speaking country. But Mary, for Mary, it wasn't that at all, and she was not happy working in a French-speaking country. So she went back to Ghana and left Monica by herself in Togo. Well, while I was on a training course in Nigeria, which is where I went first and where I expected I would stay, I'd expressed an interest in working in a French-speaking country. There again, my father was very keen on French, and he spoke French very well, and that was an influence on me. So our director at the time asked me if I would go and spend 3 months with Monica because she was alone. And so I said yes, and I went to Togo, and it wasn't very long before the Lord said to me, "This is where I want you to be." Yeah. And so Monica and I worked together in Bassar in Togo until Monica had to go home to look after her mother.
And what I find so fascinating is the pioneer work that many Bible translators do in the culture where they work. There was no written Bassar, was there? No.
Some people had tried to write it, but it wasn't linguistically based.
Yeah.
So, it was by no means used generally.
So what these people who go to these people groups do is they actually develop a proper writing system, sounds and letters and words, so that it can be written down. What an amazing work. The work of Bible translation, in a sense, is not the first work, is it?
No.
And in fact, you, before you then got into the work of Bible translation, you were involved with something else first. Tell us about that, because quite rightly, you said to me a few days ago, if people can't read, it's no good giving them a Bible. Tell us about that part.
Yes. Well, when I joined Monica, the first thing I had to do was learn the language. And when I indicated to Monica that I believed the Lord wanted me to stay in the Bassar project, because she was so much further ahead of me, and she was doing translation work already, she asked me, well, would you do the literacy work? Yeah. And so I said yes, because, as you said, what's the point of having a Bible if nobody can read it? Yeah. So I started a literacy class. I had to learn about the principles of teaching adult literacy. That was another thing, which I did on my first home leave. And had to also construct a reading primer. And I worked with that with some Basar people. And we started this class in the local primary school on a Friday, Saturday and Sunday evening. And it was, we kept it open, so it was not specifically for church people, but for anybody.
Yeah.
But I still to this day remember very clearly the Catholic priest coming to our house and saying, I want to send my catechist to your class and several of our church members. And this was really good. It was the beginning of cooperation between the only two churches that there were in Basar at the time. That's the Catholic Church and the Assemblies of God.
Yeah.
And the Catholics have really supported the translation work all through. And there's been at least one Catholic on the translation team for most of the time.
Yeah. Which is wonderful, because now we have the finished product, both New and Old Testament. It can be used across the denominations,
yes,
by Christians of all different shades.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah. So here is a woman's literary class. I like the room. It's a good roof, isn't it? Lovely. Can you see the blackboard there on the side? It's brilliant, isn't it? So this is one of the literacy classes, and here is one of the primers, the Fintiman. Fintiman. What does that mean, Sheila?
Wake up. Let's wake up. You see, it's a cockerel.
And then also you published a little book about one particular person who was involved with the translation work early on, and he's got an amazing faith story himself, hasn't he?
Yes.
This is the older Samuel, not to be
Yes.
confused with the Samuel we'll hear from later. Tell us about the older Samuel, Samuel Nabin.
Yes. Well, he was the second person to work with Monica on the translation. And he stayed with the translation project until almost the end, until he was really he was too old to be able to do it right till the end.
Yeah.
But there was at one point in his life, because he was a tailor by profession, and he really liked his tailoring work, and he decided that he was going to go to the capital, Lomé, which is on the coast, and sort of take an advanced course in tailoring, and then sort of take it back to Basar and have a good business and all that. And, well, to cut a long story short, the story is actually in this book, but it's in French. So if anybody can read French and would like to read his story, I can lend you the book. He realized that God wanted him to sew robes of righteousness for his people. And so he stayed with the translation work.
It's a wonderful image, isn't it?
Yes.
God used what he dreamt about, being a tailor of beautiful clothes, and actually make robes of righteousness. People know and love Jesus, and they're clothed in righteousness.
Yes.
Absolutely beautiful. There was one year which was a critical year for you, and if I remember rightly, that was 1980.
Yes.
For a number of reasons.
Yes.
On the home front, as it were, but also in your work
Yes.
in Togo. Tell us about that year, that critical year.
Well, Monica and I had just come back from a holiday, and we were looking at our post. And Monica had a letter from her mother in which she said, we heard that Sheila's father is not well. Is Sheila going home? That worried me. Well, I had to go to... We didn't have a telephone. Then, in 1980, the only telephones were in government offices and in the post office. So I went to the post office and phoned our person in Lomé, the capital, and asked him to phone my family and find out how my father was. And I came home and sat and waited. The man from the post office came to my house and said, your father has died. And I wanted to get home for the funeral. So I packed. Monica took me to the next town, Socode, where I could get a taxi to the capital. And I asked our man in Lomé to get my passport from the Ministry of the Interior, because it was there for renewal of visa, and to book a flight for me. And I came home and I was able to be present at my father's funeral.
Yeah.
And then, so not long after that, there was a sort of big, well, you could say, sort of upset and revolution in the project. And Monica went home, and I was by myself.
Yeah.
And I started working with the translators. And we started work on 1 Corinthians. It was my first experience of Bible translation. And I'd been to Bible college. I thought, I know the Bible. But when you have to study it in detail in order to translate the meaning into another language, I thought, I don't know the Bible as well as I thought I did. So when I came back to England for home leave, I went and did a course at what was then the London Bible College. And I was all prepared to go back to Togo to continue work on the Bassar translation. And about a week before I was due to leave, I had a letter from our director saying, would you go and help the Kpagheri project? I was absolutely shattered, because my heart, my everything was for the Bassar project.
So Kpagheri is another language
Yes.
in Togo.
Yes.
Further north?
Yes, it was in Kara, based in Kara.
Kara. That was the
Yes.
other town with red. Yeah.
Yes. In fact, Kpagheri is the second largest language spoken in Togo, and it was the president's language. There had been an American couple working in that language, but they'd gone back to the USA, and no one knew whether they were coming back or not. They were sort of incommunicado. So I found it, I could hardly pray for a week because I was just so shattered. But I felt that I had to do this. So when I went back, I had to pack up all my stuff and move to Kara. And I worked with the Café translators, who were just starting, for 2 years. And then, before I'd even gone to Africa, I promised my mother that when she was too frail to look after herself, I would come back and look after her and consider it the Lord's call to me to do that. And the Lord kept me to that promise.
Yeah.
And I came home in 1987 to look after my mother. She had Parkinson's disease. I thought, oh, it would only be about 2 or 3 years because my work in Togo is important. It was 7 years.
Yeah.
But the Lord blessed me during that time as well. And I don't regret it at all. And I think about five months before she died, I think my mother came to the Lord. I used to read a few verses of scripture and pray with her for about 5 minutes every afternoon. And one afternoon she interrupted me. And because her speech wasn't clear, I don't know quite what she said. But it seemed to me she was calling out to the Lord.
Yeah.
So I trust that I will see her in heaven.
Yeah.
And then after she died and everything was sorted out afterwards, and I came back to Togo. And I was pushed into being a translation consultant. And I started helping people in other languages with their translation work.
Yeah.
And also from 2001, I helped another language group, the Lama, which is a bit further north than Kara, until, well, I needed to come home. I was too old.
And that was in 2010, wasn't it?
Yes.
And this was the finished product. This was the book.
This was the New Testament.
The New Testament book. And you've got it here in the original. I just took a photo there. And our next slide here shows the dedication, the big celebration of the New Testament being dedicated and different Christian groups receiving this gift of the New Testament. And what I like especially is this next slide, Sheila, because when you came home to look after your mum, you showed her this work of many years, translating the New Testament into the Basar language. And then later, not least through the good efforts of Samuel Kpagheri,
Yes.
the Old Testament was also translated.
Yes.
And this is the complete works,
Yes, this is the complete Bible.
which was only finished in 2016, I believe, or 2014?
No, the dedication was held in 2015,
Yeah.
January 2015.
Yeah.
The dedication was delayed a couple of years because of sort of unrest and political troubles in the country.
Yeah.
But
Well, Sheila, a little bit later we're going to hear from you about a significant Bible passage you've chosen. But before we do that, can we first thank Sheila for sharing some of her life with us?
well, thank you for inviting me.